The ocean had swallowed Earth whole. It had been decades since the last sunburned remnants of the old world had vanished beneath the waves, and now the surface was nothing more than a forgotten dream. Whispers of a time when the land was dry and unbroken. Yet amidst the endless expanse of water, something extraordinary had survived. A sliver of hope, hidden beneath the crushing weight of the oceans, clung to life in the form of sacred land. The last bastions of Earth's once vibrant ecosystems, fiercely guarded by the descendants of humanity who had adapted to the depths. Among them were the Waterborn, the strongest of the underwater colonies, forged from the ruins of a planet that could no longer sustain itself. These warriors and scholars fought not just for survival, but for the future. Lyra Voss was one of them, a young leader whose resolve was as fierce as the storms that ravaged their world. She had grown up with the ocean pressing on all sides, but it was the ancient land, hidden, coveted, and long forgotten, that now stood between salvation and destruction. A land her people would die to protect, but as the water rose, so did the shadows. Rival factions, bent on controlling the last sanctuary of the earth, would stop at nothing to seize it. And within its depths, Lyra discovered a secret that could change everything, a relic that could restore the planet to its former glory. The catch? To unlock its power, humanity itself would need to unite. But unity in a fractured world was a luxury they could never afford. Lyra would soon learn that saving the Earth meant facing a choice no leader should ever have to make. Lyra Voss stood at the edge of the cliff, the salty wind whipping against her face. Below, the waves surged relentlessly against the jagged rocks, their force reminding her of the brutal world she had been born into. A world where land was as rare as hope, and the ocean was an unyielding enemy. The sky was clouded, casting a dull grey over everything, as if even the heavens had given up on this drowned planet. Her colony, Tethys, was one of the last to occupy a stretch of land above the waves, nestled on the fringes of what was once the Pacific Northwest. Now that land was their sanctuary, their fortress against the watery abyss. But even here, surrounded by the deep, Lyra couldn't escape the constant pressure. There were always whispers, threats of invasion, and she knew the time was running out. Lyra Voss, a voice broke through her thoughts. She turned to see Commander Jonah Ray, his expression grim beneath his helmet, his voice barely audible over the wind. "Yes?" she asked, still staring. Out at the ocean, as if the sea might offer her the answers she needed. "We've received another report from the eastern border," Jonah continued. "The Alliance is moving closer. They've sent their vanguard ships. There's no question, they're coming for us." Lyra's jaw clenched. The Alliance, the most powerful of the rival underwater colonies, had been eyeing Tethys for months. Their ambition was unmatched, their hunger for control insatiable. If they seized this land, it would mean the end of the Waterborn, and any hope for the restoration of Earth's surface would be lost. "And what of the relic?" Lyra asked, not taking her eyes off the horizon. The relic, the ancient artifact, that had been buried beneath Tethys for centuries, was humanity's last chance at saving the planet. A secret passed down in whispers, believed to be a myth by many. But to Lyra and her closest allies, it was a lifeline. It was the key to undoing the damage that had turned Earth into a dying water world. Jonah hesitated before answering, his gaze flickering to the ground. "The scans are inconclusive. We've found traces of something, but nothing solid. Some believe it's just another false hope, another wild goose chase." Lyra's heart pounded. She'd heard the rumors. The relic had been lost to time, buried beneath layers of sediment, its true purpose a mystery. But she couldn't afford to dismiss it. If it was real, it was their salvation. "I don't care what the scans say," Lyra said, her voice steely. We need to find it. We'll put every resource into it. If there's even the smallest chance this relic can turn the tide, we'll find it." Jonah's eyes softened, but he didn't argue. He knew better than to question her determination. Lyra was a woman of action, a warrior born from the harsh conditions of the submerged world. She had led them through countless skirmishes with the other colonies, and each time they had managed to fend them off. But this was different. The Alliance wasn't a force to be underestimated. They were ruthless, and if they found out what Lyra was after, they'd stop at nothing to seize it. "You'll have the resources you need," Jonah replied. "But we're running out of time. They could attack any day now." "I know," Lyra said, turning to face him at last, "which is why we need to be ready. We can't wait for them to come to us. We need to take the fight to them." Jonah nodded. He understood. But there was something in his eyes, something that hinted at a worry deeper than the threat of the Alliance. Lyra knew him well enough to recognize it. He was afraid. For her, for their people, for the land they all called home. "We'll need more than just weapons to win this," Lyra added quietly. "We'll need unity. All the colonies must join forces if we're going to survive. If we don't, we're all doomed." Jonah looked like he might argue, but Lyra silenced him with a raised hand. "The relic is our only hope, but the price of using it might be more than any of us can bear." Jonah finally spoke, his voice heavy with the weight of his words. "And if it's a lie, if it's just another legend?" Lyra met his gaze. "Then we die fighting for the one thing that might restore our world." As the sky darkened, Lyra's resolve hardened. She would find the relic, no matter the cost. Because if she didn't, Earth would have no future. But little did she know, the tides of fate were already turning, and the truth behind the relic would reveal a choice far darker than anything she could ever have imagined, Lyra awoke to the sound of sirens. The sharp, mechanical wail echoed through Tethys's narrow streets, rattling the steel beams of the colony's underground structure. It was the kind of sound that sent a chill through her bones, a sound she had heard far too many times before. "Not today," she muttered under her breath, already pulling on her combat gear as she climbed out of bed. She didn't have time for this. Not when she was so close. The relic was out there, buried beneath layers of sediment and secrecy. Every day spent preparing for an assault from the Alliance was a day she couldn't afford to lose. The comms crackled to life as she tightened her gloves. "Lyra Voss, report to Command Center. The Alliance has launched a full-scale attack." Lyra's pulse quickened, but she steadied herself. She knew this was coming. The Alliance had been preparing for months, gathering strength, consolidating resources. Their fleet of advanced submersible warships had been spotted just beyond the borders of Tethys. It was only a matter of time before they would make their move. She took a deep breath, steadying her mind. This was her duty. Her people were depending on her. If she didn't lead them now, everything would be lost. In the command center, the lights flickered dimly, casting long shadows on the walls as the tactical map illuminated in front of Lyra. Jonah stood beside it, his brow furrowed in concentration, as he traced the paths of the enemy ships. "They're moving fast," he said, his voice tense, "and they've split into smaller groups, fewer targets for our defense systems to lock onto." Lyra's gaze narrowed on the map. She could see the Alliance's movement, their ships clustering around the edges of Tethys like predators circling their prey. They were already preparing to breach the perimeter. "How long until they're within striking distance?" Lyra asked. 30 minutes, maybe less," Jonah replied, tapping a few buttons on the console. "We've got some time, but not much." Lyra felt a wave of frustration rise within her. Time was always the enemy. It never seemed to be on their side. The relic, the one thing that could save them, was still unaccounted for, hidden deep within the ancient ruins at the heart of the land. But there was no time to search now, not with the Alliance at their door. What's the status of the outer defenses? Lyra asked. Preparing for the worst, Jonah said, his voice low. We've got our best warriors stationed at the eastern gate, but the Alliance's firepower is overwhelming. They've already taken out 2 of our watch stations on the outskirts. Damn it, Lyra muttered, slamming her fist onto the table. We can't afford to lose those positions. Not now. If they breach the outer ring, we'll be exposed. Jonah looked at her, his gaze serious. And what about the relic? Are we still going forward with that plan? Lyra hesitated. The plan had always been a long shot, an attempt to find the relic and activate it before the Alliance could seize control of the land. But it seemed impossible now. If they lost the outer perimeter, the whole colony could fall in a matter of hours. She could lead her people into battle, fight for their survival, but the relic, if it was real, it could be their last hope. We don't have a choice, she said finally, her voice steeled with determination. We can't lose the relic. It's the only way forward, no matter what. Jonah nodded, but the concern in his eyes didn't fade. You're talking about a plan that requires more than just fighting. You're talking about unity, a united front from all the fractured colonies. Lyra's jaw tightened. I know, and right now that feels like a dream. The truth was, the colonies had been at war for generations. Each one had its own interests, its own priorities. The Waterborn, like Tethys, believed in preservation, in living in harmony with the planet. Other colonies, like the Alliance, sought domination. They wanted to control what was left of the Earth's surface and bend it to their will. The idea of unity was laughable, but if there was even the smallest chance, if the relic could really restore the planet, they would have to find a way. And know the risks, Jonah said, a hint of worry creeping into his voice. Activating the relic, it could flood the entire surface, destroy everything we've worked to protect. Lyra's gaze hardened. Then we fight to the last breath. We have no other choice. Jonah didn't argue. He knew as well as she did that this was the only path left. But he wasn't the one carrying the burden of leadership. It was Lyra's call, and the weight of it pressed down on her chest. The doors to the command center opened, and a young scout entered, breathless from running. Lyra Voss, the Alliance fleet has breached the outer perimeter, he said. They're coming in full force. Lyra didn't flinch. Activate the defensive grid, full power. Yes, ma'am, the scout replied, scrambling to the control panel. Jonah's voice cut through the growing tension. We can't hold them off forever. If we want to win this, we need to get ahead of them. We need to strike fast. Lyra turned back to the tactical map. The eastern gate was already being overrun. The Alliance was pushing in from all sides. It was a matter of time before they reached the heart of Tethys. There's no time for a frontal assault, Lyra said, thinking quickly. We'll divide our forces. Half will go to the western gate to hold the line. The other half, Jonah, I need you to take a team and search for the relic. We can't waste any more time. Jonah looked surprised. But the relic is... Do you have a better idea? Lyra interrupted sharply. Jonah hesitated, then nodded. He knew better than to challenge her resolve in moments like this. You're with me, Lyra said, her voice firm. We're not going to let the Alliance take this land, and we're not going to let them take Earth's last hope. Jonah grabbed his helmet and motioned for the team to follow. Lyra turned toward the exit, her heart pounding. Every second counted. They were on the brink of war, and the relic could be the key to everything, but only if they could get to it in time. The city's alarms blared as they moved through the corridors, heading for the deeper chambers of the colony, where the relic was believed to be hidden. The path ahead was uncertain, the danger increasing with every step, but Lyra's resolve remained unshaken. She would find the relic, even if it meant risking everything, and when they did, she knew one thing for certain. The future of the world would rest in her hands. Lyra led the way through the dark, narrow corridors beneath the surface of Tethys, her boots echoing on the metal floors. The sounds of battle above, muffled and distant, only made her move faster, her heart a steady rhythm in her chest. Every passing moment carried with it the weight of a world on the brink of collapse, but Lyra's focus was unshakable. She had to find the relic. They didn't have time to waste. Jonah and the rest of the team trailed behind her, their steps swift but careful, alert to the shadows that seemed to cling to every corner. The ancient ruins lay deep beneath the colony, hidden from sight for centuries. Few had dared to venture into these depths. The chambers were old, too old for anyone to know exactly what lay ahead. "I've been through these tunnels before," Jonah said, his voice low. "But we've never gotten this far down. The map doesn't show any of this." Lyra nodded, but said nothing. The maps, if they could even be trusted, only covered a fraction of the complex maze that lay beneath Tethys. She had heard stories, rumors, really, of ancient structures beneath the colony, relics from the time before the oceans had swallowed the world. The elders spoke of it in hushed tones, but even they had no real knowledge of what lay below. They had only known that something important was buried there, something that could change the fate of humanity. "I'm not sure I trust these old systems," Jonah continued, glancing up at the rusty conduits hanging from the ceiling. "Some of these chambers look like they haven't been touched in centuries." Lyra's jaw tightened. "That's because they haven't. These ruins were sealed off long before we were born, but we don't have time to question it. We need to get to the heart of this." They passed through a massive archway, the walls thick with a strange, phosphorescent moss that glowed faintly in the dark. Lyra paused for a moment, her gaze scanning the room. There was something unsettling about the stillness of it all, the way the air seemed too thick, too heavy. It was as if the very earth around them was holding its breath. "This is it," Lyra said softly, her voice steady. "We're close." Jonah gave a short nod and checked his pulse gun. "Let's make sure we're not walking into a trap." They pressed on, deeper into the labyrinth, each step further from the battle raging. Above. It was strange, Lyra thought, how the noise of war seemed so distant now, as if the conflict existed in another world entirely. Down here, in the bowels of the earth, it felt as though time had stood still. The chamber they entered was vast, its ceiling lost in shadow. Pillars of stone rose from the floor, adorned with intricate carvings that Lyra could barely make out. In the dim light, a low hum reverberated through the walls, like a heartbeat pulsing through the stone. She stepped forward cautiously, running her hand along the cool surface of one of the pillars. Her fingers brushed against something smooth, something that felt alive in a way she couldn't explain. "This place," Jonah muttered. "It doesn't feel right." Lyra ignored him, stepping further into the room. She didn't have the luxury of fear, not now. There was only the relic, only the chance to save her people and the planet. The hum grew louder, more pronounced, until it seemed to vibrate through her bones. She turned her gaze toward the far side of the chamber, where a massive stone structure loomed. It was a doorway, or perhaps a vault carved into the rock itself. There, beneath layers of dust and debris, she saw it, a faint outline, the shape of something ancient, something powerful. "That's it," Lyra whispered, her pulse quickening. "The relic. She had found it." Jonah stepped forward, his expression a mix of awe and caution. "Are you sure?" Lyra nodded, though she felt a knot of doubt tighten in her chest. The relic was real, but the question was, what would it cost to use it? She reached out, brushing her fingers against the surface of the stone door. It was warm to the touch, pulsing with an energy she could feel deep inside her. The carvings surrounding the doorway seemed to shift and shimmer as if they were alive. Lyra could feel the weight of history pressing on her, the lives of those who had built this place, the generations that had hidden this secret, hoping it would never be found. A low rumble echoed through the chamber, vibrating the floor beneath. Her feet, Jonah stepped back, eyes wide. "Something's happening!" Lyra's fingers brushed against a series of intricate symbols on the door. She couldn't decipher them, no one could, but she felt a strange resonance, as if the door was responding to her touch. The hum grew louder, more insistent. It felt like the room was alive with anticipation. A voice echoed through the chamber, faint at first, like a whisper in the wind. "Lyra." She froze, her heart skipping a beat. She had heard that voice before, but it couldn't be. She turned to Jonah, but he looked just as confused as she felt. "Did you hear that?" she asked, her voice shaky. Jonah's brow furrowed. "No, there's no one else down here, it's just us." But Lyra knew what she had heard. The voice. It was familiar but distant. It was the voice of her mother. Her. Thoughts immediately spiraled, the sudden surge of emotions overwhelming. Her mother had been a part of the old Council of Tethys before she died in the war with the northern colonies. She had been a visionary, a leader in the fight to protect their land. She had believed in the relic, in its potential to restore the Earth's surface. But Lyra had always been skeptical. She had always wondered if her mother's idealism had been a curse. Had it led to their downfall? And now, here, in the depths of the forgotten world, Lyra's mother's voice was calling to her. "Lyra," the voice said again, this time clearer, louder. "You must choose. The relic can save the world, but it demands a sacrifice." Lyra's breath caught in her throat. She spun toward the door, her eyes widening. The carvings had shifted, revealing a series of glowing symbols that seemed to pulse with an eerie light. The air around her was thick with energy, and the ground trembled beneath her feet. Jonah stepped forward, his hand on his pulse gun. "Lyra, we need to get out of here. Something's wrong." But Lyra stood frozen. The relic was within reach, and the voice, her mother's voice, insisted that she must choose. The relic could save them, restore the Earth. But at what cost? What sacrifice would it demand? Lyra's mind raced as the hum grew louder, the chamber vibrating with increasing intensity. She had no time to think, no time to question. The alliance was coming, the war was at their doorstep, and the fate of the planet hung in the balance. The chamber's rumble intensified, a deafening roar now filling the air. Something ancient was waking, and Lyra was about to unlock it. The chamber rumbled, and the air around Lyra grew heavy with the pulse of the relic, its power vibrating through the stone, through her bones. Her heart raced as she stepped closer to the glowing symbols on the vault door. It was as if the room was alive, watching her, waiting for her to make a choice. "Lyra," the voice echoed again, her mother's voice so clear now. "You must understand. The relic demands a price. The surface of the Earth cannot be saved without a sacrifice." Lyra's hands trembled as she placed them against the stone, the warmth of it sinking into her skin. She couldn't pull away, not now. She had come this far, she had found it, the key to saving everything. "What price?" she whispered, the words catching in her throat. She had known, deep down, that nothing would come without consequences. This relic, hidden for centuries, buried under the weight of the world, could not be simple. The ground beneath her feet shuddered violently, and a flash of light burst from the vault, blinding her for a moment. The voice, her mother's voice, was louder now, almost urgent. "To restore the Earth, you must unite the colonies. But the relic will not work unless you sacrifice what you love most." Lyra recoiled, her breath caught in her chest. "What I love most?" Her thoughts immediately went to the land she fought for, her people, the Waterborn, her family, her duty as their leader. Was that the sacrifice? Would she have to give up Tethys, the last sanctuary of their kind? But the relic's power surged again, and another voice broke through, this one dark, cold, distant. "You don't understand, Lyra," the voice said, its tone insidious and unfamiliar. It was the voice of someone who had been here before, someone who knew the price all too well. "The Earth's salvation comes with an end." A trade. The words crashed into Lyra like a tidal wave. Her pulse raced, her thoughts spinning in all directions. She had heard the legends, the warnings passed down from the elders, but this was beyond anything she had imagined. The relic was not just a tool, it was a judgment. "Who are you?" Lyra demanded, her voice shaking with both fear and defiance. "Why are you speaking to me?" The chamber seemed to pulse with dark energy, the very air crackling. The voice answered, its tone mocking. "I am the one who was meant to activate the relic, but I failed. I could not accept the cost." The voice was growing clearer, more real. It was not the whisper of a forgotten past, but the presence of something, someone, alive somewhere in the depths. Lyra's instincts screamed at her to run, but her feet were rooted to the ground. She could feel the relic's power wrapping around her, its pull irresistible. She was so close, the weight of her people's future, the future of Earth, hung in the balance. "You failed?" Lyra whispered, her heart thumping painfully in her chest. "What do you mean?" The voice let out a laugh, cruel and hollow. "I was the one who activated it before, in another lifetime. Long ago, when the Earth first began to die, I thought I could fix it, restore what was lost. But the price, no one could bear it. Not even me." Lyra's head spun, the words cutting deep. "What price?" The voice hesitated, and for a moment the chamber grew still, as if the very earth was holding its breath. "You have to destroy what is most precious to you," the voice said finally. "And what's most precious to you will be what you hold. Dearest." Lyra stepped back, her heart pounding in her ears. She wanted to scream, to demand more answers, but the chamber seemed to close in around her, its walls pressing against her chest. She could feel the weight of history, of those who had come before, and the burden they had carried. And now it was her turn. Jonah moved cautiously beside her, his face drawn with concern. "Lyra, we can't waste time. The Alliance is getting closer. If we don't act now, you don't understand," Lyra interrupted, her voice sharp. She turned to him, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and resolve. "It's not just about defeating the Alliance. This relic, it's more than just a weapon. It demands a sacrifice." Jonah's brow furrowed in confusion. "A sacrifice? What do you mean?" "We don't have time for riddles, Lyra. We need to get back to the surface, to fight." But Lyra was already shaking her head. "I don't know how to explain it, Jonah. The relic can restore the Earth, yes, but it demands more than just action. It demands something of us, something personal." Jonah's expression hardened as he stepped closer to her. "You're saying that if we use it, we'll have to give something up? What? Our lives? Our homes?" She shook her head again. "No, it's not that simple. We'll have to give up what we hold dearest. And if we don't make the choice, the relic won't work, the surface won't be saved." The weight of her words hung between them like a thick fog. Jonah's face twisted with frustration, his voice rising. "This is insane, Lyra. We're talking about the last chance to save the world. We can't just stand here and wait. We need to act." She could see the desperation in his eyes, the fear of losing everything they had fought for, but she couldn't let that blind her. She couldn't ignore the truth that had been spoken to her, spoken by the relic itself. She turned away, her fingers brushing the glowing symbols on the vault. The voice of her mother echoed again, faint but clear. "You are the leader. You must choose. The future of Earth is in your hands." Her chest tightened and her mind raced. Was this truly the answer? Was this the price they had to pay? The relic had the power to restore the surface, to undo the damage caused by the oceans, to bring Earth back from the brink of destruction. But at what cost? Was she ready to make that sacrifice? A sudden explosion rocked the chamber, sending a shockwave through the walls. Jonah's voice cracked with urgency. "Lyra, we've got no time." The Alliance is nearly on us. Lyra gritted, her teeth. She had no more time for questions, no more time to hesitate. The relic was ready. It was calling to her, urging her to make the choice. She turned toward the door, a single tear falling down her cheek. We have to make a decision. Now. Jonah's gaze softened, but he didn't press her further. He knew as well as she did that there was no turning back now. They had to face the consequences together, whatever they were. Lyra raised her hand, and the chamber responded, the vault door slowly creaking open. Beyond it lay the relic, glowing with an otherworldly light, pulsing with power. It was the only thing standing between them and salvation. And in that moment, Lyra knew there was no easy path forward. The sacrifice, whatever it was, had already been made. The only thing left was to choose. The vault door creaked open with a heavy groan, revealing the relic at its core, a shimmering crystalline structure that pulsed with an eerie light. It floated within a sphere of energy, suspended in midair, as if waiting for Lyra to reach out and claim it. Her heart raced as the weight of her decision pressed down on her chest. Jonah stepped forward cautiously, his eyes locked on the relic. "This is it, isn't it?" he whispered. "The key to everything. We've found it." Lyra didn't respond right away. Her gaze was fixed on the glowing artifact, and her mind churned with the implications of what she had learned. The relic could indeed restore the Earth's surface. It could undo the damage of centuries of rising seas, of lost lands and ruined ecosystems. But the price was something far more insidious, something that no one could truly understand until it was too late. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind. "You must choose." "I'm not sure I'm ready for this," she said quietly, almost to herself. Jonah looked at her, his brow furrowed. "What are you talking about? We don't have time to waste. If we don't act now, the Alliance will overrun Tethys, and we'll lose the only chance we have to save the planet." Lyra shook her head, her hands trembling. "I know, but this isn't just about Tethys anymore. This is about all of Earth, about everything that's been lost. The relic will restore the planet, yes, but at what cost?" Jonah stepped closer, his expression softening. "Lyra, I know you're scared, but we don't have the luxury of hesitation. We have to do this for your people, for Earth." For a moment, Lyra let herself breathe, let the weight of his words sink in. He was right, in a way. She couldn't afford to let fear control her decision. The relic was their only hope, and the longer she waited, the more dangerous their situation became. Above them, the sounds of battle grew louder, the Alliance closing in. But even in the face of that, Lyra couldn't escape the nagging feeling that there was something more to this. Something that went beyond strategy and survival. She wasn't just deciding whether to save her people. She was deciding whether to sacrifice everything she had ever known, everything she had ever fought for. She reached out, her fingers brushing the smooth surface of the relic, feeling its power surge through her. The energy seemed to respond to her touch, growing brighter and more intense, like the heartbeat of the world itself. And then the voice returned. "You cannot undo what has been done, Lyra," it said, its tone calm yet filled with an ancient, haunting wisdom. "To restore the Earth, you must sacrifice that which is most precious to you. You must destroy what you hold dear, or the relic will never activate." Lyra's breath caught in her throat. "Destroy what I hold dear," the voice continued, unyielding. "To save the planet, you must let go of everything that binds you to it. If you do not, the Earth will remain broken. You cannot have both." She stepped back, her mind spinning. It wasn't just about Tethys or even the Waterborn. It was everything she had fought for, the legacy of her people, the memories of her mother, the promise of restoration. Was the relic worth it? Could she bear the cost of undoing the damage to the world? The relic hummed louder, as if responding to her internal struggle, as if it was trying to pull her closer, make her choose. "You've come too far to turn back now, Lyra," Jonah said softly, stepping closer. He reached out and touched her arm, his voice full of conviction. "I know this isn't easy. I know you're torn, but the people who depend on you, they need you to make this decision. We need you to make this decision." His words were like a dagger, cutting through her hesitation. She wanted to tell him that she was already aware of the consequences, that she understood what the relic required. But she couldn't find the words. She felt as if the walls of the chamber were closing in on her, the weight of her choices suffocating her. "I don't know if I can do this, Jonah," she whispered. "I don't know if I'm strong enough." He was silent for a moment, then squeezed her arm gently. "You're stronger than you think. You're the one who led us here. You're the one who brought us this far. And now it's time to finish what you started. We don't have a choice. The Earth is dying, Lyra. You're the only one who can save it." His words were like a fire in her chest, igniting something deep within her. She could see the future, her people, her world, resting on the edge of a blade. She was the leader of the Waterborn. She had been raised to make impossible choices. And this was the ultimate one. The relic pulsed, its glow intensifying. The voice of her mother whispered again, this time softer, almost pleading, "Lyra, listen to me. You cannot restore the Earth without sacrifice. You cannot protect what you love without destroying part of it." Lyra's mind flashed to her people, her family, the Waterborn, the land they had fought to protect for generations. She thought of her mother, who had dreamed of a world where the seas would recede, where Earth would once again be habitable. But could she bear to give up what her mother had worked for? Could she sacrifice the very land her people had protected? With their lives, her heart broke as she thought of Tethys, her home, the last refuge of humanity, the last trace of the Earth before the oceans had risen to claim everything. Would she truly destroy it to save the planet? Tears welled up in her eyes as she reached out to the relic again, her fingers trembling. She felt its power surge through her, its energy connecting her to something beyond herself. And in that moment, she understood what had to be done. The Earth was broken, but she had the chance to fix it, to undo centuries of destruction, to restore what had been lost, but at a cost. The relic's glow brightened, and the voice returned, its tone final. "Do you choose to save Earth, Lyra Voss? Do you accept the price?" Lyra closed her eyes, her mind clear for the first time in days. She had made her decision. She could not let the world be destroyed for the sake of preserving what she had. The Earth needed to be healed. Humanity needed to unite. The surface needed to be restored, no matter what. "I accept," she whispered. And as soon as the words left her mouth, the world seemed to shift. The relic's power surged, flooding the room with blinding light. The walls cracked and trembled as the ground below began to shift. Jonah stepped back, his eyes wide with fear. "Lyra, what's happening?" But it was too late. The choice had been made. The price had been paid. The chamber shook violently as the relic's energy enveloped the room. A torrent of light burst forth from the crystal, blinding Lyra and Jonah, pushing them back into the stone walls. The very air seemed to warp around them, rippling with the raw power of the ancient technology. For a moment, time itself seemed to bend, stretching like a taut string pulled to its breaking point. Lyra stumbled, her hands pressed against the cool stone to steady herself. Her heart was pounding in her chest, but it wasn't fear that gripped her now. It was a growing sense of realization. The decision had been made. The price had been paid. And now there was no turning back. She looked around the room, blinking as the light from the relic began to subside, leaving an eerie calm in its wake. The walls trembled, but the noise of battle from above had grown muffled, distant, as though the world itself was holding its breath. The relic pulsed in the center of the room, its light flickering like a heartbeat. Jonah staggered to his feet beside her, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Lyra, what have you done?" he whispered. She swallowed hard, the weight of his words crashing over her. She had made her choice. She had activated the relic to save the planet. But now, as the reality of her decision settled in, she could feel the cost. The chamber around them began to shift. The floor rumbled beneath their feet as the relic's power reached a crescendo. A blinding flash of light consumed the room, and then, just as quickly as it had started, the chaos stopped. The room fell into an unnatural stillness. Lyra stepped forward cautiously, her eyes scanning the space around her. She could feel the energy in the air, dense, alive and heavy with the weight of everything that had just occurred. The relic had done its work, but the question was, what had it cost? Before she could react, a sharp pain lanced through her chest. She gasped and staggered back, clutching at her heart. It was as though something inside her was being ripped away, torn apart. The pain was unbearable, but it was not physical. It was deeper, more profound, like a wound to her soul. "Lyra!" Jonah shouted, his voice filled with panic as he rushed to her side. "What's happening? But before he could finish, Lyra collapsed to her knees, her body trembling. The world around her began to blur, and for a moment, everything seemed to fade into darkness. But through the fog of pain, one thing was clear. Her mother's voice whispered through her mind again. "You have given up what you love most. You have sacrificed your home, your people, to save the earth." "No!" Lyra gasped, her voice strained. "No, it can't be. This can't be it." But the pain only intensified. It was as if the relic was pulling away everything that had ever anchored her to the world. Everything she had fought for, everything she had protected. It was slipping through her fingers like sand. Jonah knelt beside her, his hands trembling as he tried to lift her. "Lyra, stay with me, please. You're scaring me." She looked up at him, her vision swimming. "The land at Tethys, it's gone." His face twisted with confusion. "What are you talking about? You activated the relic. The surface is supposed to be restored. This is what we needed. The earth will heal." Lyra's heart felt as though it was being torn apart. She could feel it, Tethys, her sanctuary, the last piece of land, sinking beneath the waves. It was disappearing, vanishing into the ocean that had once consumed the world. She had chosen to save the planet, to give humanity another chance, but at the cost of everything she had ever known. The relic's power was immense, but it had come with a price. One that she hadn't fully understood until now. The earth would heal, yes, but at the expense of her people. Tethys would be swallowed by the very waters they had fought so hard to escape. She had traded everything for a future she could never return to. Jonah's eyes widened as he began to piece together the truth. No, Lyra. You couldn't have meant to sacrifice us. He stopped mid-sentence, his voice caught in his throat. The ground beneath their feet shifted again, and the walls of the chamber groaned, as if the very foundation of Tethys was breaking apart. Through the cracks in the walls, Lyra could see it. The water was rising. It was rising faster than she could comprehend. Tethys was sinking. She felt it in her bones. The water, once an enemy, was now her legacy. She had given up the land she had sworn to protect, to save the rest of the world. The relic had restored the Earth's surface, yes, but Tethys, the last sanctuary, was the price. The land that had been their home for generations was now lost to the ocean. Gone. Erased. "No," Jonah breathed, his voice breaking as he stared at her. "No, Lyra. This wasn't supposed to happen. You saved the earth." But Lyra closed her eyes, her breath shallow as the tears finally began to fall. The weight of the decision pressed down on her chest, suffocating her. I didn't know it would cost this. I thought I thought I could save both. But it was too late now. The flood had begun, the waves crashing over Tethys as the last pieces of land disappeared into the depths. Jonah looked at her, his face full of grief and anger. But there was something else there. Understanding. He knew that she had made the only choice she could. It was too late to turn back now. "Lyra," he said softly, his voice thick with emotion. "We have to get out of here. We have to..." But before he could finish, another rumble shook the room, and a wall of water crashed through the chamber's entrance. The flood had reached them. Lyra's body shook with exhaustion, and the pain of her sacrifice felt unbearable. She had saved the earth, but at what cost? The land was lost. Her people were lost. The future she had envisioned was slipping away, just like Tethys. As the water rose around them, Lyra knew there was no escape. She had made her choice, and now the consequences were unfolding, irreversible. But in the midst of it all, as she looked into Jonah's eyes one last time, she knew that she had given humanity a chance. The surface would heal, Earth would recover, and even if she and the Waterborn were lost to the sea, the world would survive. She had made the ultimate sacrifice. The floodwaters surged around them, the once stable ground beneath Lyra's feet, now a roiling, shifting mass of chaos. The weight of the sea pressed in from all sides, the walls of the chamber beginning to crack and splinter as the water rushed in. Lyra's vision blurred as the waves churned higher, pushing her toward the abyss. "Lyra!" Jonah shouted, his hand gripping her arm, trying to pull her toward the exit, but she could barely move. The pain in her chest was unbearable, a constant reminder of the choice she had made, the choice that had cost everything. The land, the last piece of humanity's home, was gone. Her heart ached as she thought of the Waterborn, her people, her family. They were lost, swallowed by the flood that now consumed Tethys. She had saved the planet, yes. The surface would heal, Earth would breathe again, but the price of salvation had been too high. The cost had been more than she could bear. Jonah, her voice was a rasp, barely audible above the roar of the rising water. She struggled to focus, her thoughts clouded with grief. "We have to go. There's no point in staying. Tethys is gone, there's nothing left." Jonah's face twisted in anguish, his grip tightening on her arm. "No, Lyra, you don't understand. We can still fight. We can still save what's left. But we need you." "Jonah." She shook her head, her strength fading. "It's too late. We've lost everything." The water was rising faster now, almost to their knees. The relic's energy had begun to fade, its power spent. Lyra could feel it, the heavy weight of the decision she had made settling in her bones. The surface of the earth would be restored, but the cost had been her home, her people. Tethys would be consumed by the very oceans that had once defined their existence. There was no undoing it now. But in the back of her mind, something stirred, a flicker of hope. The earth was healing, the relic had worked. Despite the pain, despite the loss, the planet would survive. The future would not be lost. Humanity would have a chance, but only if they were willing to rebuild. Lyra gasped for breath as the water reached her waist. She could feel the relic's presence slipping away, its power drained. But as it did, she realized that her sacrifice, her decision to save Earth, wasn't the end, it was the beginning. You saved us, Lyra, Jonah whispered, his voice breaking as the water surged. "Higher. You gave humanity a chance. Don't you see? You made it possible." She turned her eyes toward him, her vision swimming with tears. The weight of everything was too much to bear. But somehow, in the midst of the pain and the loss, a part of her knew that Jonah was right. She had given humanity a chance to rebuild, to heal. Earth would recover. The surface would rise again, and with it, humanity would have the opportunity to change. The floodwaters rose above her chest. But Lyra stood tall, her feet planted firmly on the shifting ground. Despite the overwhelming loss, despite the grief that gripped her heart, she knew that her people, though lost to the sea, would not be forgotten. The sacrifice she had made would never be in vain. The relic's power was gone, but its legacy would live on. The earth would heal, the surface would rise, and humanity, if they were willing, would rebuild. "We can't stop," Lyra said, her voice filled with quiet determination. "We have to keep moving forward. The earth needs us. We need to fight for it, for all of us. There's still hope." Jonah nodded, his face a mixture of pain and awe. "You're right. We can't let it all be for nothing. We have to carry on." As the floodwaters closed over her head, Lyra closed her eyes for a moment, letting herself feel the weight of the world. She had lost everything she had known. Tethys, her people, her home, all swallowed by the sea. But in the face of all that loss, she knew that the earth had a future, a new future, and somewhere deep within her, she found the strength to keep going, because that was the true meaning of her sacrifice, to give the earth a chance to heal, to give humanity a chance to rebuild. As the waters rose, Lyra's heart beat with one final powerful truth. The last horizon was not the end. It was just the beginning.